Why was she still sitting like that? Perfect posture, feet flat, shoulders straight, hands resting on the armrests as if awaiting inspection. Sarah Martinez caught herself and almost laughed at the absurdity. She was just another passenger on a commercial flight from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. No one cared if she slouched. No one was watching to see if Colonel Martinez maintained Academy form at 35,000 feet. And yet, 20 years of muscle memory were hard to break. She shifted slightly, forehead against the window of seat 13F below. Kansas unrolled like a patchwork quilt, circles of irrigation, neat rectangles of wheat and corn, tiny ribbons of highways, connecting nameless towns, a living map, ordinary and safe. She told herself to breathe it in, to remember what peace looked like from above. It was supposed to be a gift, the quiet of civilian air travel, the anonymity of jeans and a sweater instead of a uniform that carried weight everywhere it appeared. But the jeans felt wrong, too stiff against her legs after months of flight suits and dress blues. Even the sweater, her sister Elena's Christmas gift, felt foreign against skin accustomed to Kevlar and Nomex. The wool was soft, almost luxurious, but it whispered of a life she wasn't sure she remembered how to live. General Hayes had insisted she take this leave, practically shoved her out the door. Martinez, if I see you in my office before May 1st, I'll have the MPs drag you to a beach. Your squadron is home safe. Your reports are filed. Take the gift before it kills you. So here she was. No call sign, no flight plan, just a tired officer visiting her aging mother in Arlington. Just another name on a passenger list of 127. Just another woman pressed against an airplane window, pretending she wasn't trained to catalog every potential threat before the safety briefing even ended. The flight attendant noticed. Of course she did. Jennifer Walsh, kind eyes, silver at her temples, a smile that could calm a nervous flyer at 30,000 feet. When she refilled Sarah's coffee, her gaze lingered. She saw it. The posture, the scanning eyes, the squared-away carry-on tucked with surgical precision in the overhead. Military? She asked as softly. Sarah's fingers tightened around the cup. She had wanted invisibility. She had wanted to just be Sarah. Not Phoenix, not Colonel, not the face on recruitment posters or the name whispered in Air Force ready rooms, but the bearing never disappeared. She couldn't shake it. Air Force, she admitted, voice low. Jennifer's expression softened with understanding, the kind of understanding only someone who'd lived it could hold. My husband was Navy. 22 years, 3 deployments. I can always tell. It's the way you carry yourselves. Sarah gave a small smile, gratitude mixed with the weight of being seen. She had spent months in combat zones surrounded by soldiers. Airmen, Marines, men and women who understood the life without explanation. Here, she was surrounded by strangers who worried about Wi-Fi connections and delayed flights. But Jennifer's words cut through the isolation. A thread of recognition, a reminder that service, once given, never really leaves you. The cabin was alive. With the hum of ordinary life, a businessman in 13D hammered away at his laptop, a Bluetooth headset blinking as he argued about quarterly projections. Across the aisle, a young mother struggled with twin toddlers who found magic in every tray, table and window shade. Her husband slept beside her, a military ID poking from his wallet army. Sarah guessed, judging by the weary tilt of his head. A group of college kids in the back laughed too loudly over shared earbuds, oblivious to anything heavier than an exam or a spring break hangover. None of them knew. None of them recognized the woman in 13F as Phoenix, the pilot who had coaxed the burning F-16 home over the Hindu Kush, who had been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, whose tactical innovations had saved forward operating base Chapman. To them, she was just another traveler, maybe a teacher, maybe a consultant, and she preferred it that way. Still, invisibility had a cost. What did normal even feel like anymore? When had she last been somewhere without measuring escape routes and potential threats? When had she last heard laughter without the undertone of gallows humor? When had she last been surrounded by people whose biggest fear was a missed connection? The engines droned steady, creating a white noise that lulled most passengers toward sleep. Sarah let her shoulders relax just slightly. She looked at the patchwork below, at the highways, the small towns, the meandering rivers. This was what she'd been fighting for. Not slogans or speeches, just the fragile miracle of ordinary lives continuing uninterrupted. A businessman lost in spreadsheets, a mother soothing restless children, students planning a future they believed would be safe. For the first time in months, she closed her eyes, not to escape, but to remember what it felt like to be human, not just a warrior. And then something, a vibration, so faint it might have been nothing. But her body knew before her mind processed. A pulse through the airframe, a wrongness in the rhythm of the machine. Her eyes snapped open. Instinct kicked in. Combat-honed nerves firing faster than reason. 3:47 p.m. Mountain Time. 2 hours and 13 minutes into a routine flight. The vibration came again. Low frequency. Too persistent for turbulence. Not random enough to be dismissed. Her hand braced against the window. Her heart slowed into that unnatural calm that had saved her life more than once. Around her, no one noticed. The businessman typed on. The toddlers whined. The students laughed. The world trusted the machine. But Sarah had felt this before in an F-16 over Kandahar. When her hydraulic pump began to die. The body of an aircraft has ways of speaking to its pilots, whispering warnings before systems light up. And this Boeing was speaking, loudly. Then came the shudder. Coffee splashed from cups, heads lifted. Annoyed, curious, Maria, the young mother, pulled her twins closer. Maternal instinct sensing what logic hadn't yet. The captain's voice crackled overhead. Calm. Too calm. Minor technical difficulties. Please fasten your seatbelts. Sarah's blood chilled. She had used those words herself when her own engine had been on fire at 25,000 feet. Pilots lied like that to buy time, to keep panic at bay. Minor technical difficulties was code for everything may be unraveling, and I need silence to fight it. The shudder became a shake. Overhead bins rattled. Phones and pens slid from tray tables. The businessman's laptop snapped shut crack. Someone whispered a prayer. Sarah cataloged every symptom. The nose pitching unevenly. The vibrations. Irregular rhythm, the subtle engine changes most would miss. Her pilot's brain translated the language of distress into probabilities. None of them good. Then it came. That sound. A grinding metallic screech from deep inside the plane. Hydraulic failure. Primary systems. Maybe secondary. She knew it instantly. She could hear pumps engaging, failing, controls resisting. The captain's voice returned. Calm cracking at the edges. Emergency procedures. Prepare for possible emergency landing. The word emergency hit the cabin like shrapnel. Gasps, cries. Maria clutched her children. Someone in the back began to sob. A young student whispered, oh God, over and over like a broken mantra. Masks dropped with a mechanical thunk, swaying like yellow flowers above terrified faces. Sarah moved fast, calm, automatic, mask secured, mind racing. They were in uncontrolled descent now. This wasn't turbulence. This was a bird fighting gravity with broken wings. Her heart pounded, but her thoughts were ice. Hydraulic system failure, manual reversion. Pilots fighting with raw muscle to control. 180,000 pounds of aluminum. Through her window, she saw the Colorado landscape rushing upward far too quickly. Memories flashed. The same sick drop in her stomach when her Falcon had bled control and nearly spiraled into the mountains. That moment of cold clarity when you realize survival is math, physics, and decisions measured in seconds. She told herself one truth. She was powerless, a passenger, civilian clothes, no controls in her hands. No authority in this cockpit, but Sarah Martinez had never accepted powerlessness. Not in Afghanistan. Not in a sandstorm with a dying engine. Not when Marines were pinned down and her wing was failing, and not now. She was in seat 13F. But she was still Phoenix, and she was already planning her next move. What gave her the right to stand? What gave her the authority to move against every airline protocol, every unspoken rule of being a passenger? Sarah asked herself those questions, even as her body answered for her. She unclipped her belt. She rose against the weight of turbulence, against the terrified eyes that tracked her in confusion, and against the ingrained voice of caution that whispered, "Stay put. This isn't your fight." But it was. She knew at the moment the plane lurched again, sending a rolling shiver down the fuselage. Coffee cups toppled. Someone screamed. A child wailed. Fear was spreading like fire in dry grass, unpredictable and contagious. Jennifer Walsh, the flight attendant with the kind eyes, stumbled past her row, checking oxygen masks, repeating trained phrases with a voice that cracked despite her professionalism. Sarah reached out, steadying her with one firm hand. "Jennifer," Sarah said. The way she said her name calm, measured, carrying the authority of someone who had given life and death orders, made the attendant stop short. "I need to talk." To the captain, Jennifer blinked. "Ma'am, please sit down." "The pilots are. I'm a pilot." Sarah cut in, her grip tightening just slightly. "Not desperate, but unyielding. United States Air Force. I've flown through hydraulic failures before. Multiple system failures. I can help. For a heartbeat." Jennifer hesitated. Procedure screamed at her. No passengers in the cockpit. No exceptions. But the plane shuddered again, harder this time. And when she looked into Sarah's eyes, she didn't see panic or delusion. She saw something else, a calm so absolute it almost frightened her. "What kind of pilot?" Jennifer whispered. "Fighter pilot." Sarah answered, eyes locked on hers. "F-16's combat missions. I've brought home battle-damaged aircraft before. I've been where your captain is right now." Another metallic groan echoed through the cabin. The nose dipped, then corrected with a violent jolt. Gasps erupted across the rows. Jennifer's hand trembled as she reached for the master key on her belt. "Follow me," she said, as they moved forward through the tilted cabin. Sarah grabbed the intercom handset from its cradle near the galley. Passengers watched her, eyes wide, breaths shallow behind masks. Some clutched hands, some prayed. Most were paralyzed between disbelief and terror. Her voice cut through it all clear, steady, commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Colonel Sarah Martinez, United States Air Force. I want everyone to listen to me very carefully. We are going to get through this, but I need you to stay calm, follow instructions, and trust your crew. The pilots are highly trained, and I'm going to help them bring us home safely." It wasn't what she said. It was how. The cabin stilled, as if a switch had been thrown. The sobs softened. The murmurs quieted. Even the college kids who had been praying in whispers looked up, wide-eyed. Fear hadn't vanished, but it had been given shape, given direction. As Sarah handed the intercom back, the businessman from 13D reached for her arm. His face was pale, his voice shaking. "You're really Air Force?" "Yes, sir," she said, with a small, final squeeze of his shoulder. "And we're going to be fine." At the cockpit door, Jennifer's key clicked in the lock. They pushed inside, into a world of cramped space and desperate control. Captain Mike Thompson's face was flushed, sweat beading despite the chilled airflow. His hands fought the yoke like a man wrestling a stubborn animal. First Officer Lisa Chun's knuckles were white on her own controls, lips moving silently as she ticked through emergency procedures from memory. The cockpit smelled of stress metal, plastic and human fear mingling in tight quarters. "Captain," Sarah said, voice steady. "Colonel Sarah Martinez, United States Air Force. I'd like to help." Thompson shot her a look sharp with irritation. "Ma'am, this is a complex. You've lost primary hydraulic pressure. Sarah interrupted, eyes already scanning instruments with the speed of fluency. Backup system is failing or already gone. You're getting maybe 20% response on your flight controls. You're using differential thrust to hold heading and muscling the yoke just to stay level. Both pilots froze for half a second. Her assessment had taken 12 seconds, and it was perfect. Thompson's skepticism flickered into shock, then something closer to recognition. How? Because I've been exactly where you are, Sarah said, settling into the jump seat behind them without waiting for permission. Different aircraft, same problem. I brought an F-16 home with total hydraulic failure over the Hindu Kush. Your Boeing has redundancies, mine didn't. The physics are identical. Lisa Chun looked over her shoulder, sweat dampening the edges of her hairline. What are you suggesting? Sarah leaned in, her voice low, precise. Denver International is too far at this descent rate. You've got 10 minutes before it's unrecoverable. We need a military field closer, Force Academy, Buckley, Peterson, long runways, crash. Equipment on standby. Thompson swallowed, gripping the yoke tighter. And you're suggesting what? That I just let some passenger fly my aircraft? Not some passenger, Sarah said. Phoenix. For a beat, silence filled the cockpit. Thompson blinked. Lisa's eyes widened. The name had weight. They had heard it. All pilots had. Phoenix wasn't a rumor. It was a story passed around ready rooms. Flight schools, late-night hangars. The woman who had pulled off the impossible more than once. Sarah slipped the headset on, her tone shifting into the clipped cadence of military. Comes. Denver Center, United 847. This is Colonel Sarah Martinez, United States Air Force. Call sign Phoenix, assisting the crew with emergency procedures. Request immediate vector to nearest suitable runway and full emergency services. The radio crackled with sudden silence. Controllers on the other end were processing. Phoenix, that call sign, that legend, then. A reply voice altered by disbelief. But carrying respect, United 847, Denver Center. Confirm call sign, Phoenix? Confirmed, Sarah answered. Phoenix is on station. Her eyes returned to Thompson's, unblinking. Mike, can I call you Mike? I need you to trust me. What I'm about to suggest is going to feel wrong. But it's the only way we save this airplane. For a long moment, the captain studied her face. He saw what she had carried into the cockpit. Not arrogance, not bravado, but a quiet calm born from dancing with death before and refusing to bow. What do you need? He asked. Sarah allowed herself the smallest, thinnest smile. I need you to let Phoenix fly. How far can trust stretch before it breaks? That was the unspoken question hanging in the cockpit, hovering as heavily as the failing Boeing itself. Captain Thompson's hands gripped the yoke. He had flown for 23 years, crossed oceans and storms, diverted into blizzards, dealt with every kind of turbulence. But this? A hydraulic failure spiraling toward catastrophe? He had never faced it. And now a stranger. No, not a stranger. Phoenix was asking him to surrender instinct and procedure. Sarah leaned forward, eyes calm, hands open. Not demanding, not pleading, just present. Mike, I'm not taking your airplane. I'm giving you options right now. You're fighting physics with dying systems. That fight is unwinnable unless we change the rules. Beside him, First Officer Lisa Chung glanced between them. Voice taut, Captain. She's right. Controls are sluggish, response is minimal. We're burning muscle just to keep wings level. If we keep this rate of descent, Denver's out of reach. Thompson's jaw clenched. And your plan? Use what's left. Differential thrust, gravity, airflow. It'll feel wrong. But wrong might be all we have. Sarah's tone hardened. You've got 127 lives in this fuselage. If you're too proud to let me help, then you'll carry that weight. I've carried it before. I know how heavy it is. The cockpit shuddered as the airframe groaned, a violent shake like the plane itself urging them forward. Finally, Thompson gave a single, sharp nod. "Oh, right, Phoenix, show me." Sarah's hands moved with a familiarity that astonished him. The instruments weren't hers. The layout different from her Falcon, but flight was flight. Physics was physics, and emergencies didn't wait for manuals. Her eyes swept the panel, cataloging every vibration, every twitch of a gauge. "Lisa, call out airspeed fluctuations every 10 knots. Mike, ease off your right engine 2%, left engine up 3. That's your rudder now. Treat thrust like paintbrush strokes, not brute force." The Boeing shuddered, nose twitching, but steadied, marginally. It was like coaxing a wounded bird through crosswinds. Sarah pressed her headset mic. "Denver Center, Phoenix on comes. We are no longer stable for Denver International. I need nearest alternate with military-grade runway, crash equipment ready, immediate. Denver Center." Responded with urgency now. Respect replacing doubt. Phoenix, Denver Center. Buckley Space Force Base is nearest. Runway length sufficient. Equipment standing by. Military liaison activated. "Copy," Sarah replied. "Vector us direct." And then, something no one in the cabin would forget, another voice broke in. Calm, professional, but carrying the undercurrent of disbelief. "United 847, Denver Center. Confirm. Did you say Phoenix?" Sarah's voice didn't waver. "Confirmed, Colonel Sarah Martinez. Call sign Phoenix. I'm assisting the flight crew." The pause that followed wasn't silence. It was a ripple. Through radios, through control towers, through the invisible web of military comms that never truly slept. The legend was alive. And she was on a crippled passenger jet with 127 souls depending on her. Within 90 seconds, Peterson Space Force Base lit up its emergency channels. Buckley scrambled. Cheyenne Mountain pulled her service record, most of it blacked out, but enough visible to send a chill down the spine of every duty officer reading it. At Buckley's ready room, Major Kevin "Hawk" Rodriguez was halfway through weather reports when his secure line buzzed. Emergency scramble, civilian aircraft. Hydraulic failure, Phoenix on board. He read it twice, jaw slack. Then he shouted across the room, "Viper!" "Gear up, we're escorting." Captain Amy Viper Chun didn't even hesitate. She knew the name. Everyone did. Phoenix wasn't myth. She was instruction. Cadets at the academy studied her maneuvers as case studies in survival. Pilots carried her stories like talismans. "Phoenix?" she said, pulling on her flight suit. "Phoenix," Hawk confirmed, eyes sharp. 4 minutes later, 2 F-22 Raptors thundered into the Colorado sky, afterburners carving light across thin air. Back in United 847's cockpit, Sarah could hear the strain in the engines, the metallic fatigue echoing through every control. The cabin behind her was a chorus of muffled prayers, frightened whispers, children crying into masks. But inside her, a calm clarity pressed down like gravity itself. This was the zone where seconds stretched, where problems became puzzles, where fear bent to focus. Her voice cut across military and civilian airwaves. "Denver Center. Phoenix requesting fighter escort for visual monitoring. We're heavy, unstable, and if we lose remaining authority, I want eyes on us immediately." "Copy, Phoenix," the controller replied, awe-threading through professionalism. Buckley flight inbound, ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes? Could they last that long? "Mike, ease yoke pressure. Stop fighting. Let the airframe tell you what it wants. You'll burn out before the hydraulics do." He shot her a look. "Feels like we're giving up." "No," Sarah said quietly. "Feels like surrender. There's a difference. You surrender to physics, not to fate." The words hung in the cockpit like a lifeline. Minutes later, Hawk's voice cut in on frequency. Calm, steady, the sound of backup arriving. "United 847. Hawk Flight has you in sight, Phoenix. It's Major Rodriguez. How can we assist?" Sarah's heart lifted at the sound. Just slightly. Friendly steel in the sky. Guardians arriving. Good to hear you, Hawk. We're working a wounded bird here. I need runway priority at Buckley. Every emergency vehicle you can roll and keep. Those Raptors close. If we bleed control, I want you calling out every inch we drift. Copy that. We've got you covered. Through the cockpit windows. Sunlight flashed off gray angles of Raptor wings sliding into formation. Sleek predators flanking a broken giant, escorting not with weapons, but with faith. And in control rooms, ready rooms, and operations centers across the world, radios crackled. Retired crew chiefs who had serviced her Falcons tuned in. Cadets at the academy abandoned classrooms to crowd around speakers. Veterans in hangars leaned over radios, whispering, "Phoenix is flying again." The cabin of United 847 didn't know all the details, but they could feel it. A shift, a gravity of hope replacing the vacuum of fear. Maria Santos whispered to her boys, "The lady helping is a hero. She saved people before. She saved us too." And Sarah, seated between two strangers at dawn and now in the cockpit at dusk, knew the truth that pressed deeper than fear. She wasn't just flying a crippled Boeing. She was carrying 127 lives, and the weight of a legend she never asked for but could not refuse. The radio crackled again, controllers clearing airspace, diverting traffic, voices tinged with awe. The world was watching, and Sarah Martinez, Phoenix, whispered under her breath as her hand steadied on unfamiliar controls. "Let's bring them home." What does courage sound like when everything is breaking? It wasn't in shouts or orders. It was in a calm voice, steadying trembling hands. In the refusal to let silence turn into despair, Sarah leaned forward, head set snug, eyes locked on the instruments. The Boeing was holding, but barely. Hydraulic systems bled out like lifelines cut. Every correction fought against dead weight. She could feel it in the airframe itself. A wounded bird limping through sky it was never designed to survive in. "Mike, listen to me," she said, her voice precise. "Stop thinking airline. Start thinking test pilot. Everything we're about to do is going to feel wrong. But wrong is all we've got." Captain Thompson gave her a sharp look. His face was lined with strain, sweat dripping into his collar, but he nodded. He had never ceded authority in the cockpit before, but something about her tone, the matter-of-fact calm, demanded not submission but trust. First Officer Lisa Chun's voice came steady despite the white knuckles on her yoke. "Checklist items are exhausted. We're down to instinct now." "Good," Sarah replied. "Instincts kept me alive more than manuals ever did." She pressed the transmit switch. "Denver Center, Phoenix. Confirm Buckley runway status." "Phoenix, Denver Center, runway 14L at Buckley cleared. Crash crews on standby. Air National. Guards scrambling helos for medevac support. All civilian traffic diverted." "Copy," Sarah answered. "Tell them this approach is going to be unconventional, and I need every foot of that runway." Beside her, Thompson muttered, "Unconventional?" Sarah didn't look at him. "Fast, steep, and ugly. We'll ride the edge of stall all the way in. If we try a textbook descent, we won't make the threshold." The radio crackled again. Hawk's voice, steady, grounding. "Phoenix. Hawk flight. We're in position. You've got two Raptors watching every twitch." Sarah allowed herself half a breath. "Appreciated, Hawk. Keep us honest. Call out drift or nosebleed if you see it." Outside, through the cockpit glass, the sleek F-22 slid into tight formation. Guardians flanking a crippled airliner. Their presence both symbolic and practical. A reminder that even legends didn't fly alone. The Boeing shuddered violently, dropping 20 feet before catching. Again, gasps rippled through the cabin behind the cockpit door. Sarah imagined the fear. The prayers whispered into oxygen masks, the children clutching strangers' hands. And with that image came clarity. The reason she couldn't fail, Lisa. "I want airspeed every 10 knots on descent. Don't sugarcoat. If we bleed too fast, call it, Mike. Your yoke isn't steering. It's suggesting. Don't fight it, coax it. We're painting with air now. Thompson exhaled, forcing his hands to ease. Feels like letting go of the wheel. It is, Sarah said softly. Sometimes, control means surrendering to what the machine still wants to give. Take too much, she break. Lisa glanced back at Sarah, studying her. You've done this before. Sarah's eyes didn't leave the altimeter. I've done worse, but this time, I don't intend to lose anyone. The Boeing trembled again, but steadied. Sarah adjusted engine thrust with subtle strokes, left engine up, right down, coaxing the nose back to center. It was delicate, like holding a fractured bird whose wings still twitched with life. Behind them, the world was listening. At Denver International's tower, controllers leaned over consoles, eyes locked on radar sweeps. At Cheyenne Mountain, operators read aloud fragments of Sarah's service record to hushed rooms. At Buckley, families of airmen gathered near fences, desperate for a glimpse of the legend guiding a wounded giant home. And in military-ready rooms across the country, voices whispered over radios. Phoenix is flying again. Back in the cabin, word spread passenger to passenger. Maria Santos told the elderly couple beside her. She's a colonel. They call her Phoenix. She's famous for saving lives. The businessman Robert Kim repeated it to the college. Students behind him, their eyes widened with awe. A young woman whispered, "My brother talks about Phoenix all the time. He said she was a legend." Fear didn't vanish, but it changed. It sharpened. It turned into something closer to faith. Sarah keyed the mic again. Denver Center. Phoenix. Beginning controlled descent. Advise ground. This landing won't look pretty, but we'll walk away. The reply came back tinged with reverence. Phoenix, Denver Center, cleared for any approach you deem necessary. All services ready. Mike's jaw tightened as he stared at the gray strip of numbers sliding on the altimeter. God help us. Sarah's eyes narrowed. God already did. He gave us time. Let's use it. The descent began. At 32,000 feet, the Boeing bucked like an angry animal, nose twitching, wings rocking. Sarah's hands moved in careful rhythm, matching thrust to drift, balancing forces with the precision of a surgeon stitching fragile skin. At 28,000, the shuddering worsened, instruments trembling as if unsure whether to obey physics or prayer. Lisa's voice cut through steady. Airspeed. 220. 210. 200. Hold her nose, Mike, Sarah said, voice sharp but calm. Don't fight the roll. Counter with breath, not muscle. Thompson grunted, sweat dripping, but obeyed. The nose leveled. At 24,000, Hawk's voice cut in. Phoenix. Your nose is dropping 1 degree starboard. Adjust. Sarah responded instantly. Copy. Left engine +2, right -1. The Boeing corrected. At 20,000, the cabin rattled with oxygen rushing louder, masks tugging against faces as descent steepened. Children cried. Adults whispered prayers. Yet amid it all, one thing was different. There was order now, not chaos. Sarah's words from earlier, "We are going to get through this," still hung like a shield over them all. She leaned toward Mike, her voice lower, personal. You've flown people across oceans. Families, kids, soldiers going home. You've carried them safely thousands of times. Today isn't different. Today, you're still a pilot. Trust that. His throat tightened. But he nodded. Copy, Phoenix. The altimeter ticked downward. 18,000, 16,000. The Rockies loomed ahead, jagged teeth of stone catching late afternoon sun. For a second, the cockpit filled with light, golden, almost cruel in its beauty. Sarah steadied her breath. This is what it means to fly at the edge. To dance with gravity and ask it to wait just a little longer. Her hand brushed the console. Eyes locked forward. She didn't pray. She didn't plead. She simply commanded the air, the engines, the wounded bird beneath her, and far below, on runways and in living rooms, in towers and hangars, across radios and screens. The world held its breath, waiting to see if Phoenix could rise once more. How do you tell 127 people that the way down may not look like survival? You don't. You show them in your voice that survival is possible. You teach them to believe it, even when the math says otherwise. Sarah's hands moved lightly over the unfamiliar controls, coaxing the wounded Boeing down through layers of atmosphere. Altimeter ticking, engines howling. The airframe itself groaning like a creature straining against gravity's pull. At 14,000 feet, turbulence rattled teeth and hearts alike, Captain. Thompson muttered, "Feels like we're flying a brick with wings." Sarah's reply was calm, clipped. "Then we treat it like a brick, manage its fall, control its energy." She pressed her mic. "Denver approach, Phoenix, we're inbound Buckley. But tell your tower, this is not a textbook approach. We're coming in fast, steep, and possibly sideways. Clear everything within 20 miles. The controller's voice came back, strained with awe. "Phoenix, Denver approach, runway clear. All emergency services staged. You are cleared for any approach you deem necessary." "Copy," Sarah said. "Stand by." Behind her, Lisa called out in steady cadence. "Airspeed 190. 185. 180. Sarah nodded. "Good. Hold her nose shallow, Mike. Don't flare like you're used to. We're flying this bird onto the runway, not floating her down." He shot her a look. "That goes against every instinct I've got." She met his eyes, unwavering. "So does flying combat with a dead stick in a sandstorm. Instinct can kill you if it's the wrong one. Trust the math, not the feeling." Another shudder shook the aircraft, overhead bins rattling, loose items clattering down the aisle. Fear surged through the cabin. Children cried out. Somewhere, mid-cabin, a man whispered a prayer out loud. Sarah closed her eyes for one half breath. She didn't hear the man. She heard her cadets from the academy, repeating her old lecture. Survival is choosing calm when instinct screams chaos. Fear is math with missing numbers. Complete the equation. She opened her eyes. "Lisa, what's our altitude?" 10,000. "Good. Keep calling." Through the cockpit glass, the land rose into sharp relief. Colorado's ridges, the dark slash of runways in the distance, and holding perfect formation just outside, the sleek guardians of hawk flight. Kevin Rodriguez's voice came steady over comms. "Phoenix, you're lined up, winds calm, skies clear. Buckley Tower reports full emergency crews staged. We're with you all the way." Sarah's lips pressed thin. "Appreciated, Hawk. Don't blink. If we yaw, call it." In towers across the region, eyes tracked the crippled Boeing at Denver. International, 37 emergency vehicles lined the concrete, waiting in grim anticipation. At Buckley, families of airmen stood near fences, hearts in throats, watching the dot in the sky grow larger. And in squadron ready rooms across the world, radios buzzed with voices, veterans, cadets, instructors, whispering the same words. Phoenix is bringing them home. But inside the cabin of United 847, time stretched and thickened. Fear had burned itself down into something quieter, something heavier. Passengers gripped hands. Mothers whispered promises they couldn't guarantee. Strangers leaned into one another's presence, knowing there was no dignity in fear, only humanity in connection. Maria Santos pulled her twins close, whispering, "The lady pilot is going to save us. She's done this before." The boys clung to her sweater, eyes wide. The businessman Robert Kim turned in his seat toward the college kids. His voice shook, but his words were clear. "My brother's in the Air Force. He says Phoenix isn't a myth. She's real. That's her. That's her." "Who's in the cockpit?" The students stared, all blooming in fear's place. "She's flying our plane?" One of them whispered. "She's saving it," Robert answered. And so, row by row, seat by seat, the cabin began to understand. They weren't just passengers anymore. They were witnesses. At 7,000 feet, Lisa's voice cut through. Airspeed. 175. Stable. Sarah nodded. Good. Keep her nose steady. Remember, we're not landing on Buckley. We're aiming through it. Let momentum bleed on concrete. Mike swallowed hard. That's going to feel like driving into a wall. Better concrete than mountains, Sarah answered dryly. The Boeing jolted again, wings twitching, nose yawing left, before she caught it with thrust adjustments. Her hands never shook, her voice never cracked, but inside, her chest tightened with the familiar weight, the knowledge that this might be the last set of decisions she ever made. Her thoughts flicked, just for a second, to Elena, her sister, wrapping presents months ago, begging her to take leave, to her mother in Arlington, waiting for her daughter who always promised to come home, to the cadets who still saw her as legend, not a woman weary of carrying so much. And then she shut it all out, because sentiment could wait. Physics could not at 5,000 feet. Hawks. Voice came sharp. Phoenix, you're drifting port. Nose high 1 degree. Copy. Correcting. Sarah answered instantly. Engines shifted. Nose steadied. Lisa called. Airspeed 170. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Good. Keep her hot. We'll bleed later. Mike's hands tightened on the yoke. Feels like we're screaming in. Sarah's reply was soft, almost kind. We are, but screaming is still flying. Outside, the runway loomed larger, a gray scar of salvation across the earth. Emergency trucks lined either side, lights spinning in silent anticipation. At 3,000 feet, the cabin fell silent. No sobs, no murmurs, no panic now. Only the steady rush of air and the roar of engines. Everyone had found their own way to quiet. Prayer, memory, hope. The human heart can only thrash so long before it yields to stillness. Jennifer Walsh, moving down the aisle one last time, steadied herself against a seat and made the announcement. Her voice trembled but carried weight. Ladies and gentlemen, the pilot assisting our flight crew is Colonel Sarah Martinez, United States Air Force, call sign Phoenix. She has saved lives before. She will save ours now. Please, trust her. We are in the best hands possible. The words fell into the silence like light into darkness, and the cabin believed at 1,500 feet. Sarah's eyes locked on the runway, calculating distances, airspeed, thrust angles, bleed rates. Every number mattered. Every second carried weight. Mike, she said quietly, start your flare at 50 feet. Not before, shallow. Gentle. Let her settle. He swallowed. Understood. Lisa, Sarah added. Count me down every 100 feet. Don't stop. Lisa nodded. Her voice was clear. 1,000, 900, 800. The Boeing trembled, wings twitching, nose yawing again before correcting. Engines screamed under full reverse. Preparation. The air was thick now, full of vibration and the raw sound of gravity clawing. 600, Lisa called. Sarah's voice sharpened. Mike, eyes on me, not the ground. Trust the numbers. 500, 400. Her hand rested lightly on the console, not grabbing, not forcing. Steadying. Flare shallow. Let her kiss it, not fight it. 300, outside. Emergency vehicles rolled in tandem, sirens muted, lights flashing. F-22 Raptors held perfect guard, wings sharp against golden sky. 200. Sarah inhaled once, a breath that carried 20 years of combat, countless missions, nights of fire and fear, moments of quiet humanity she had fought to protect. She let it out, slow. Flare, she said. 50 feet. Lisa's voice cut. Mike pulled. The Boeing's nose lifted. Just enough. Just shallow. Wheels kissed concrete. The world braced. What does survival sound like? Not a cheer, not applause. At first, it sounds like thunder. Engines screaming against gravity's demand. Tires shrieking across concrete. an entire machine straining to defy its own momentum. The Boeing slammed onto Buckley's runway like a giant collapsing under its own weight. The main landing gear groaned, tires biting asphalt. For an instant, it seemed almost normal, the way any airliner might touch down after a long flight. But Sarah felt it immediately. No hydraulic braking, no steady control. This was not a landing. This was a controlled crash measured in inches and seconds. Reverse thrust now. She barked. Mike yanked the throttles back. The engines roared, metal screaming in protest as they pushed against forward motion. The cabin shook violently. Loose objects clattered across the tilted floor. "Lisa, call speeds every 10 knots." Sarah shouted. Her voice cut through the chaos with surgical precision. 120. Lisa called. Sarah's eyes flicked between instruments and runway. "Good. Hold center. Don't fight drift. Bleed it." Emergency vehicles paced them on parallel taxiways, red lights flashing in a blur of urgency. Fire crews, medics, crash recovery teams, all holding position, ready to charge. 110. The nose wobbled, threatening to yaw. Sarah adjusted instantly. "Mike, ease right engine 2%. Let her straighten herself." He obeyed. The Boeing steadied. 100. In the cabin, silence shattered. Children cried. Adults sobbed openly. Prayers collided in every language. Passengers gripped hands so tight their knuckles blanched. Strangers leaned into each other's shoulders, united by fear that survival was still not promised. Maria Santos held her twins so close they could barely breathe. "Almost home," she whispered, over and over. "Almost home." Robert Kim, the businessman who had abandoned his spreadsheets hours earlier, clutched the seat back in front of him. "Hold on." He muttered to no one in particular. "Just hold on." 90. Lisa called. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "We're bleeding, but not enough, Mike. Full reverse thrust. Don't be afraid of the roar. Fear the silence that comes." Too soon. Engines howled louder, vibrations rattling teeth. The Boeing shuddered, nose dipping, then catching. 80. Emergency trucks edged closer, matching speed. Drivers gripping wheels with white-knuckled hands. They knew too well how momentum could still turn triumph into disaster. 70. The end of the runway rushed closer. Concrete, finite, unforgiving. Sarah's voice sharpened. "Lisa, every 5 knots now. 65. 60. 55. The airframe screamed, brakes groaning against forces they weren't designed to handle without hydraulics. Tires smoked, metal protested. The smell of burning rubber filled the cabin. 50. Sarah's voice dropped low, steady, almost intimate. "Stay with me. Stay with me." The altimeter was irrelevant now. It was all speed, all distance, all raw momentum. 45. 40. The runway's end markers loomed, red and white blocks of warning. 35. 30. Sarah clenched the console. "Come on. Come on. 25. 20. The Boeing groaned one last time, tires shrieking as if in agony, and then silence. The aircraft rolled to a complete stop, just 800 yards from the runway's end. The cockpit exhaled as one. Mike slumped against his yoke, sweat pouring. Lisa sagged back, tears streaking unnoticed down her face. Sarah closed her eyes for half a second, letting the silence register, letting it sink into her bones. They had stopped. Against all odds, they had stopped. But when she opened her eyes, there was no triumph, only duty. "Mike, Lisa," her voice was softer now, but no less commanding. "We're not finished. The emergency isn't over until every passenger is on the ground." Mike swallowed hard, nodded. "Copy." Lisa exhaled, pulling the checklist closer with trembling hands. Securing systems outside. Emergency vehicles swarmed the jet like guardian angels closing ranks. Fire crews rolled foam units into position. Medics leapt from ambulances, stretchers ready. Crash teams stood poised for smoke, flame, or worse, in the cabin. Silence lasted only a heartbeat before it broke like a dam. Applause, cries, sobs of relief so raw they seemed torn from lungs. Passengers hugged strangers, kissed children, wept into the shoulders of people they hadn't known 3 hours ago. Jennifer Walsh's voice finally cracked as she gripped her intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Buckley Air Force Base." Her words were drowned in cheers and tears. Maria clutched her twins, laughing and crying at once. "We made it," she whispered. "We made it." Robert Kim pressed his hands over his face, shaking his head. "God bless that woman. God bless her." In the cockpit, Sarah's hands moved automatically across switches, shutting down systems, securing what needed securing. Her face remained composed, but her chest was tight with something she couldn't let show yet. Relief, gratitude, a weight lifting she hadn't realized she was carrying. Mike turned to her, voice hoarse. "I've flown 23 years. I've never seen anything like that." Sarah shook her head gently. "You flew it. I just helped you see what was possible." Lisa managed a trembling smile. "Ma'am." "That was extraordinary." Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she stood, straightened her civilian sweater, and let her eyes fall on the cockpit door. Beyond it, 124 passengers were waiting, not just for deplaning, for something more. Jennifer appeared, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Colonel, there are people outside who want to see you." Sarah hesitated. A tired colonel in jeans and a sweater. Not a uniform, not polished, not prepared for ceremony. But when she stepped into the light beyond that door, she realized it wasn't about uniform. It never had been. Because outside, lined along the runway, were men and women in uniform, Air Force, Guard, veterans, retirees, standing in formation. And as she appeared, they raised their hands in salute. What does dignity look like when it isn't dressed for ceremony? Not in medals or uniforms, not on a stage. It looks like a woman stepping out of a cockpit in a wrinkled sweater, eyes shadowed by exhaustion, carrying nothing but calm in the middle of chaos. Sarah paused at the threshold of the open cabin door. The ramp beyond was alive with movement, fire crews unspooling hoses just in case, medics scanning passengers through open windows, command staff barking clipped orders into radios. But through that controlled chaos, a stillness waited, rose. Of uniformed airmen and officers lined the tarmac, shoulders squared, boots planted. And as her figure appeared, every right hand rose in unison to salute. It was not choreographed. It was instinct, recognition. The sound wasn't applause. It was silence heavy with respect, a silence that pressed against her chest more forcefully than turbulence ever had. Jennifer Walsh, still by her side, whispered through her tears, "They're saluting you." Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to deflect, to remind herself she was just a passenger who happened to stand. But the weight in their eyes told her the truth. She wasn't just anyone to them. She was Phoenix, behind her. The cabin stirred. Passengers crowded windows, praying for a glimpse of what was happening outside. A boy pointed, his small voice carrying above the murmurs. "They're saluting her." And suddenly, the passengers understood. The whispers from earlier, the steady voice over the intercom, the impossible calm during descent. This wasn't myth. It was standing at their door. Maria Santos pressed a trembling kiss to her boys' heads. "See?" she whispered. "I told you, heroes aren't stories. They're real." Robert Kim leaned forward in his seat, staring through the window as tears filled his eyes. "Phoenix," he said softly, almost reverently, in the aisle. The college students sat frozen, their earlier prayers now replaced by awe. One of them murmured, "She really is who they said she was." Sarah stepped down the narrow stairs to the tarmac. The late afternoon sun caught her face, painting gold across tired features. For the first time, she looked not like a passenger, not like a survivor, but like the soldier she had once been. walking into light she never asked for. An Air Force colonel in full dress blues stepped forward. His salute was sharper than the others, held longer. His voice carried across the stillness. "Ma'am." On behalf of every man and woman in uniform, welcome home. Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. She hadn't expected this. She had braced herself for physics, for death, for survival, not for honor, not for this weight that felt heavier than any cockpit she had ever commanded. Slowly, she raised her hand and returned the salute. It trembled only once before holding steady. The air seemed to exhale at that gesture, like something sacred had been completed. Around her, airmen shifted. From formation, some lowered their hands to clap passengers down the stairs, guiding children, supporting the elderly. Others kept their eyes on her, nodding with small, unspoken messages. "We know who you are. We know what you've done." A medic jogged past, pausing only to say, "Hell of a landing, ma'am." Then he was gone, tending to a passenger with chest pain. Sarah turned and froze. A boy, no more than 8, stood clutching his mother's hand. His eyes were wide, shimmering with awe. His voice trembled when he asked, "Are you really a fighter pilot?" The words pierced deeper than the salute had. She crouched down so they were eye to eye. The boy's face was smudged with tears and fear, but behind it burned curiosity, belief, the fragile spark of hero worship. "Yes," Sarah said softly. "I am." The boy's grip tightened on his mother's hand. "Did you save us?" Sarah swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting in her eyes. "No," she said gently. "We saved each other. The pilots, the crew, the people who stayed calm. I just helped." The boy nodded solemnly, as though absorbing a lesson far larger than his years. Then, with a small, trembling salute of his own, he whispered, "Thank you, ma'am." Something broke loose in Sarah's chest then. She returned the boy's salute with slow, deliberate precision. And in that moment, she wasn't Phoenix the legend or Sarah the weary traveler. She was simply a soldier passing a torch to the next generation. The boy's mother mouthed, "Thank you," with tears streaming. Sarah only nodded, because words would fail here. Around them, the atmosphere softened. Passengers stepped down, one by one, into the waiting arms of medics, officers, and strangers who had come running to witness history. Some hugged her, some whispered blessings, some only touched her sleeve in silent gratitude before moving on. But the eyes lingered, always the eyes, some filled with awe, some with tears, some with unspoken questions. Who was she really? What had she seen? What had she lost? Sarah felt the weight of all of it pressing in, not in a way that crushed, but in a way that reminded. Legends weren't armor. They were mirrors. People saw in her not what she was, but what they needed to believe. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across Buckley's runway, Sarah realized something quietly devastating. She wasn't sure she could carry that belief forever. But for today, for these passengers, she would. Because survival wasn't enough. Dignity demanded. What happens after survival? Not celebration, not noise. Often, it's just silence broken only by the sound of boots on concrete, stretchers rolling, radios crackling low. Survival feels less like triumph and more like exhaustion settling. Deep in your bones, Sarah stood just beyond the wing of the Boeing, watching passengers file into waiting buses and ambulances. Some waved back at her, some whispered her name, some only looked at her as though they were afraid to blink, afraid. She might vanish like a dream. She didn't move toward them. She didn't stand in their photographs. She didn't want to be the center of their story. She wanted them to forget her face and remember only that they had walked away from an ending that could have been final. Mike Thompson approached quietly, his captain's uniform rumpled, sweat darkening the collar. His voice was husky with words he'd never rehearsed. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Sarah said softly, still watching the line of passengers. "You flew your plane. You stayed with them. That's what matters." He shook his head. No. You saved us. I've been flying for 23 years, and I've never seen hands like yours on a throttle. She turned at that, meeting his eyes for a long beat. You've carried people safely for decades, Mike. Today was no different. The only difference was that the world was watching. Lisa joined them, her hair pulled loose from its bun, face streaked with sweat and tears. She didn't say anything at first, just wrapped her arms around Sarah. For a moment, Sarah stiffened. She had never been comfortable with embraces after missions. But then, slowly she let herself return. Thank you, Lisa whispered into her shoulder, for teaching me what calm looks like. Sarah exhaled, her voice quiet. Calm is just fear with discipline. Lisa pulled back, eyes wet but steady. Then you're the most disciplined woman I've ever met. Before Sarah could respond, Hawk and Viper approached the F-22, pilots who had flanked the crippled jet through its impossible descent. They stood at attention, but there was warmth in their eyes, something deeper than protocol. Hawk spoke first. Ma'am, it was an honor to escort you. Sarah studied them. So young, so sharp, so full of belief. She wondered if they knew what it cost to carry legend on your shoulders. You didn't escort me, she corrected gently. You escorted them. She nodded toward the last of the passengers stepping into buses. Don't ever forget who matters most. Viper smiled faintly. Still, ma'am, Phoenix flying again? That's something we'll never forget. Sarah's chest tightened at the word Phoenix, a call sign that had been hers once. A name whispered through hangars, classrooms, ready rooms. A name that was less about who she was and more about what people needed her to be. But tonight she was just Sarah, a woman in a sweater. Standing in the glow of fading sunlight, tired to her core, she excused herself quietly, slipping away from the cluster of uniforms. Past the flashing lights, past the bustle of recovery. No cameras followed. No reporters had arrived yet. Only the base chaplain, standing quietly near the fence line, noticed her walking alone. He nodded once in silent respect. She returned the gesture, nothing more. The parking lot was nearly empty. A single sedan waited. Base personnel had arranged it. She slid into the driver's seat and sat there for a long moment, hands resting on the wheel, staring out at the runway where 100 lives had almost ended. Her reflection in the windshield, stare back-lined with fatigue, eyes shadowed, hair disheveled. Not Phoenix, not legend, just Sarah Martinez. She thought of the boy who had asked if she was really a fighter pilot. The boy who had saluted her with trembling fingers. That image stayed with her more than the salute of officers, more than the gratitude of passengers, because it wasn't awe, it was hope. Hope that someone could stand in the fire and still walk out carrying others. Her breath caught once, tight in her chest. She let it out slowly. The car engine turned over. She drove in silence, past hangars and gates, past fences lined with families who still waved at the buses carrying survivors. She didn't stop. She didn't roll down her window. She simply drove until the base lights faded in her rearview mirror. She wasn't running from what had happened. She wasn't seeking recognition. She was doing what she had always done, slipping back into the shadows after the fire was out. Because true service was never about being seen. The world would tell the story anyway. Passengers would recount it to their families. Air traffic recordings would circulate through training halls. Cadets would study her maneuvers as case studies. In survival, the name Phoenix would echo louder than before, and she would let it. Not because she needed it, but because stories give people strength. Even if the woman behind the story longed only for peace. As she merged onto the quiet highway, dusk settling across the plains, Sarah allowed herself a final reflection. Dignity is not loud. It doesn't argue. It doesn't boast. It doesn't even explain itself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.